Owen Croft stood at the altar, his jaw clenched as he stared at the church doors. In 10 minutes, he would be married to a woman he'd never properly spoken to. A woman the whole town saw as little more than a servant, a foreigner they whispered about behind their hands. The banker's cold ultimatum echoed in his mind. Marry within the month or lose the ranch. Behind him, he could hear the snickering gossip of the townsfolk who had orchestrated this cruel joke. They thought it was a fine bit of sport, tying the grieving rancher to the Chinese laundry girl. Just 2 weeks ago, Owen had been in Banker Thorne's office, begging for more time. The drought had killed half his cattle, and the remaining herd wasn't enough to cover his debts. "I've got a solution for you, Croft," Thorne had said with a smirk. "The town committee has been discussing your situation. You need a wife to help raise that little girl of yours. And we think a bit of humility would do you good." Thorne leaned back, enjoying himself. "Marry my Lynn, the little laundress. The town finds it fitting. Do it by month's end, or I call in your loans. All of them." The very next day, Mrs. Gable, the town's self-appointed queen of gossip, had paraded a young woman into his kitchen. "Owen Croft, meet your salvation." He stared at the woman standing silently behind Mrs. Gable. My Lynn was small and moved with a quiet dignity that seemed out of place with her simple, worn clothes. She'd arrived in town a year ago, part of a family that came seeking gold and found only tragedy. After her father's death in a mine collapse, she'd taken on laundry and mending to survive, enduring the town's suspicion and scorn with a straight spine. She was seen, but never known. What Owen didn't know was that My Lynn faced her own ultimatum. Mr. Thorne, who owned the building where she lived and worked, had delivered it himself. "This town doesn't like unattached foreign women," he'd sneered. "People are talking. It's indecent. You'll marry the rancher, or you'll be on the next stagecoach out of town with nothing but the clothes on your back." The choice, such as it was, had been made for her. Now, as the church doors creaked open, both bride and groom felt the weight of their shared prison. My Lynn walked down the aisle in a simple grey dress, her face a mask of calm that hid her screaming nerves. She looked neither left nor right, focusing only on the grim-faced man waiting for her. Owen watched her approach and felt a strange mixture of resentment and pity. They were both victims, pawns in a game orchestrated by others. The ceremony was a tense affair. Rose, Owen's 2-year-old daughter, cried throughout the service, as if she understood this stranger was about to change everything. When it came time for Owen to kiss his bride, he barely brushed her cheek, and My Lynn's face burned with humiliation. The reception was even worse. Mrs. Gable proclaimed loudly, "See? Owen gets a housekeeper, and the girl gets a roof over her head. Everyone wins." Owen's knuckles went white around his coffee cup. The ride to the ranch was conducted in deadly silence, with Rose whimpering in My Lynn's uncomfortable arms. When they arrived at his modest farmhouse, My Lynn stepped down from the wagon and surveyed her new home. It was clean but sparse, clearly the domain of a man who had given up. Owen carried their bags inside and turned to face his new wife. "Let's get one thing straight," he said, his voice cold. "This is a business arrangement. You'll have a spare room. I expect you to take care of Rose and run the house. Beyond that, we don't need to pretend this is anything more than what it is." My Lynn lifted her chin, her voice soft but firm. "I understand, Mr. Croft. But I have conditions. I will be treated with respect, not as a servant. And if I am to care for your daughter, I will do it my way." They stared at each other across the small living room, two proud people backed into corners. Rose chose that moment to start crying again, reaching for her father. Owen took his daughter with visible relief, and My Lynn felt something crack inside her. "I did not ask for this," Owen said quietly. My Lynn picked up her single cloth bag. "Neither did I, Mr. Croft. But we are here now." She climbed the stairs to her new prison, leaving him alone with his daughter and his regrets. The first week of their marriage was a silent war. My Lynn threw herself into organizing the house, bringing an order to the chaos Owen hadn't even noticed. She established routines, mended clothes, and cooked meals that were nourishing but unfamiliar. Owen responded by pointedly ignoring her efforts, moving things back to where they'd been when his late wife, Sarah, was alive. It was a petty battle for control in a home where he felt he had none left. Rose became the unwilling battleground. The little girl, sensing the tension, grew fussy and difficult. She would cry whenever My Lin tried to feed her and clung to her father with desperate intensity. My Lin approached childcare with a quiet patience Owen couldn't deny, but Rose's rejection was a constant, painful reminder of her outsider status. "She does not like me," My Lin said one evening, as Owen took a screaming Rose from her arms after another failed dinner. "She's just adjusting," he replied, though they both knew it was more than that. Rose was a symbol of everything they'd both lost: Owen's happy marriage, and My Lin's chance at a life with a family who chose her. The turning point came on a Thursday night. A winter storm raged outside, trapping them in the farmhouse. Owen had just come in from the barn when he heard My Lin call his name with an urgency that chilled him. He found them in Rose's bedroom. His daughter's face was flushed red, her body burning with fever, and her breathing was shallow and ragged. "We need to get her to the doctor," he said, reaching for his coat. But My Lin's hand on his arm stopped him. "The storm is too strong. The cold air would make her worse." Owen looked out the window at the howling blizzard and felt his heart sink. They were trapped. "Then what do we do?" he asked, his voice cracking with fear. My Lin was already moving, laying Rose gently on the bed. "My mother taught me the old ways," she said, her voice steady. "Herbs, remedies. I can help her, but I need you to trust me for the next several hours." My Lin took charge with a quiet authority that stunned Owen. She sent him for cool water and cloths. From her small bag, she produced dried herbs he'd never seen before, brewing a fragrant, steaming tea. She gently sponged Rose's hot skin and coaxed tiny sips of the tea between the child's lips. "Keep talking to her," My Lin instructed. "Let her hear your voice." Owen found himself telling Rose stories about the ranch, his voice a low murmur. He soon realized My Lin was speaking too, her voice mixing with his in a gentle chorus. She sang soft lullabies in her native language, her tone full of a tenderness he'd never witnessed. For the first time, Owen saw past the quiet servant the town had mocked to the strong, capable woman underneath. As dawn broke, Rose's fever finally did as well. Her breathing became steady, and she slept peacefully. Owen slumped in his chair, exhausted but overwhelmed with gratitude. "She's going to be fine," My Lin said softly. There was a maternal love in her voice that was unmistakable. "Thank you," he said, and he meant it more than any words he'd ever spoken. My Lin looked surprised. "Your mother taught you well," she offered, a small, tired smile, and Owen was startled to realize how beautiful she was. "She used to say that healing is about more than medicine. It is about caring enough to fight for someone." The words hung in the air, heavy with new meaning. In the days that followed, as Rose recovered, the walls between them began to crumble. They started talking, sharing pieces of their pasts. Owen spoke of his first wife, Sarah, and his dream of building a ranch that would last for generations. My Lin told him of her family in China, of a scholar father who had taught her to read, write, and work with numbers, believing a daughter's mind was as valuable as a son's. "I never wanted to marry again," Owen confessed. "I thought marriage was supposed to be about love, not survival." My Lin nodded. "I thought I would never marry at all. I did not believe a man in this country could see me as anything more than a foreigner." The moment of honesty prompted another from Owen. "The ranch is failing," he said, the admission tasting like ash. "Even with Thorn off my back for now, I don't know how long we can hold on." My Lin looked at him directly. "My father was a merchant before we came here. He taught me ledgers." "Let me see your books." Owen's pride bristled, but then he remembered her competence during Rose's illness. He nodded. 3 hours later, My Lin looked up from his ledgers with a frown. "These numbers are wrong," she said, her finger tracing a series of entries. "Mr. Croft." "Owen?" "I believe Mr. Thorn has been stealing from you for years." The accusation hung in the air. As Owen leaned over her shoulder to study the documents, he caught the faint, clean scent of her hair. My Lin felt the warmth of his presence and had to force herself to focus. "Look," she said, her voice slightly breathless. He charged you for phantom deliveries, inflated interest rates. The drought hurt you, but this is what has been crippling you. They worked late into the night, building their case. Owen found himself watching her, amazed by her sharp intelligence. You have a mind for business, he said, genuinely impressed. My Lin laughed, a sound he was starting to enjoy. My father believed a woman should be able to protect herself with her mind, not just her husband. Owen felt a surge of anger at a world that would dismiss such a brilliant woman. The confrontation with Thorne was swift and decisive. They walked into the bank together, a united front. Thorne began with his usual condescending tone, but his bluster faded as My Lin laid out the evidence, piece by damning piece. He tried to dismiss her, a woman wouldn't understand these things, but My Lin met his gaze without flinching. I understand theft, Mr. Thorne. And I understand that Judge Harrison will, too. Faced with meticulously documented proof, the banker collapsed. He agreed to full restitution, not just for Owen, but for several other ranchers he had been cheating. As they walked out of the bank, Owen felt as if a great weight had been lifted. That night, for the first time, they shared a real meal, filled with conversation and laughter. Rose, sensing the change, let My Lin feed her without a fuss. We make a good team, Owen said quietly, looking at his wife across the table. The way her eyes lit up made his heart do something complicated in his chest. 3 months into their strange marriage, everything had changed. Rose began calling My Lin Mama Mai, running to her with scraped knees and stories. The ranch, under their joint management, was beginning to thrive. The awkward silences between them were replaced by comfortable companionship. They worked side by side, their hands occasionally brushing, their conversation stretching from ranch business to shared dreams. One evening, as they reviewed plans for a new pasture, their hands touched over a document. Neither pulled away. They looked into each other's eyes and saw something that had nothing to do with business arrangements. They were falling in love, and it terrified and thrilled them both. The peace was shattered when Sarah's parents, the Harringtons, arrived unannounced with a lawyer. "We're here for Rose," Mrs. Harrington announced, her voice dripping with disdain as she looked at My Lin. "Our granddaughter will not be raised by her." The custody petition they served claimed Owen was an unfit father due to his financial instability and his scandalous and unnatural marriage. "They cannot take her," My Lin said, her voice fierce with a protective instinct that surprised them both. "Rose is our daughter now," but Owen's face was grey with fear. "They have money and influence. How do we prove to a judge that this is real when it started as a joke?" The hearing was a brutal affair, but the town, having witnessed the transformation of the Croft family, rallied behind them. Neighbors testified to their hard work and devotion. The doctor spoke of how My Lin had saved Rose's life. But it was My Lin's testimony that silenced the courtroom. "Your Honor," she began, her voice steady. "I did not give birth to Rose, but I have loved her through every fever and celebrated every new word. Love is not about the color of your skin or the country of your birth. It is about choice. Every day, I choose to be her mother." The judge's decision was firm. The evidence clearly shows that Rose Croft is in a stable, loving environment. Custody will remain with her father and his wife. That night, as they held each other, the fear and tension of the trial finally gave way. "They tried to prove our marriage was a sham," Owen murmured against her hair. "Instead, they proved it was the realest thing in this whole town." 1 year after their forced wedding, Owen stood on his porch watching My Lin teach their daughter to weave wildflowers into a crown. The ranch was thriving, but more than that, it had become a home filled with laughter and love. My Lin was 5 months pregnant with their first child together, and the sight of her took his breath away. The defensive walls she had built were gone, replaced by the confident grace of a woman who knew she was cherished. Rose, now a happy, chattering little girl, ran up to them. "For the baby, Mama Mai," she said, placing the flower crown on My Lin's belly. The town's attitude had shifted completely. What began as a cruel joke was now spoken of as a legendary love story. Mrs. Gable even took credit, conveniently forgetting the malice of her original intentions. As evening fell, they sat together on the porch, Rose asleep in My Lin's lap. "Do you ever think about our wedding day?" Mylin asked softly. Owen smiled. I think about how angry I was, how trapped I felt. I thought my life was over. He paused, stroking his daughter's hair. I was a fool. My life wasn't ending. It was just beginning. The town forced us to the altar, Mylin said, her hand finding his. But everything that came after, that was our choice, and I'll keep choosing you, Owen said, his voice thick with emotion. Every day, for the rest of our lives, he looked at his thriving ranch, his happy daughter, and his beloved, pregnant wife, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. The townsfolk had meant to humiliate him with a joke, but they had inadvertently given him the greatest gift of his life. Mylin was supposed to be a convenient wife, a cruel punchline. Instead, she had become the heart of his family, the love of his life, and the woman who owned his soul completely.